We decided to do this session really, I suppose, because the pandemic has accelerated, the interest and necessity of e-commerce. And also we're coming up to that holiday shopping season, sort of starting with Singles Day on the 11th of November, and then going all the way through to Chinese New Year. So I should say it's not intended to be like a 101 on online brand enforcement. This is more sort of signposting some best practices, a bit of food for thought during the season, and then really sort of taking it from there. So what we've seen over the past sort of 5 years or so is this emergence in new e-commerce platforms. And with that comes an increasing array of notification mechanisms and also IP protection programs. Now, what that means, obviously, is that there are lots of different rules of the game and that some are better than others. So I don't propose to read out the whole slide, but here are some of the sort of better platforms, if you like. So someone like Pinduoduo is an interesting one. They've been around for sort of 2-3 years now, predominantly. They've started their IP protection mechanisms and sort of looked at what some of the other kind of market leaders were doing and decided to actually start off at quite a high level. So theirs is very good from a collaboration perspective. So that's definitely one that would be worth looking into if you're not already monitoring it, but also considering partnering with them. I should say that none of these are probably as good as having a centralized program. And by that, I mean with a software provider that's monitoring everything. But at the same time, there is definitely an improvement there. So Mercado Libre, for example, that's a much better program than it used to be. So first line of defense are these built-in mechanisms that we have on the platforms. They're some of the better ones. Now, as well as those basic notice and takedown mechanisms, we also have one or two other bits and pieces. So we've got the Amazon Counterfeit Crimes Unit, or the CCU. That's only been going for about a year, just over. But actually, in that time, they've come up with quite a few sort of different lawsuits. So some of you might have seen in the press the other day, they've actually just settled a case. It was the Fitzpatrick and Kelly Krejci case, which essentially involved a lot of influencer fraud on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And they reached a settlement with that party. So a lawsuit was issued last year. And the settlement is quite powerful. So the profits made by those influencers will be going to various charities, including, I think, Inter's raising awareness amongst 18 to 25-year-olds. They're also going to be cooperating with investigations with defendants and third parties, and also any other sort of further action that's going to be taken. So this is kind of one example of, doing a bit more than a notice and takedown, but without not going for sort of big ticket litigation as a private brand on your own. And typically these will be done as joint actions. So Amazon and GoPro have recently launched a case as well, which is filed against a Chinese party. And that is actually also ongoing along with concurrent criminal actions in China. So there is definitely some power to be had there. And I think that's a change from maybe the sort of atmosphere at various conferences 5 or so years ago when people were just frustrated with the platforms. I think really it needs to be a case of keep your friends close and your enemies closer in these scenarios to some extent. So Amazon have done a lot to help. It's probably more the preserve of the bigger brands, to be honest, where they're going to get involved. But again, certainly something within the toolkit to think about. Then moving on, a slightly different angle is the Alibaba Anti-Counterfeiting Alliance. Now, This is probably a slightly more sort of advocacy-based program, where there are various working groups. Say you'll have a working group for, say, automotive, luxury, tech brands. But again, that's a really useful forum for lots of brand owners to actually be able to discuss these issues and find a common place, perhaps, advocating change on those platforms, but also more generally within their sector or the industry at large. So some examples there of ADR. Then to the bad. So we've just been talking about Amazon and how, Alibaba and how good they are. I guess this goes back to just knowing the rules of the game, and also really being able to manage the business's expectations. So what we tend to find, especially if you're a large e-commerce retailer, if you have a large amount of products, for example, and you're not able to claim the copyright in all of them or provide a very laborious statement, there can be some pushback there. So that's just something to bear in mind from getting the right results. Something that we try sometimes is to do a relatively catch-all statement relating to the website and the photography process, if there are any similarities. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Moving on to just Tokopedia in 11ST quickly. So we talked about Pinduoduo. These two are probably examples of where you need to do a bit of housekeeping at the outset, because they have quite draconian requirements before actually they will do a notice and takedown. So that's really just to signpost their processes. So moving on to doing more than just working with the platforms. So some of you might have come across this before. So the ACPA, as it's commonly known, it's a piece of US law that was originally anticipated for domain name squatting, came out the same year as the UDRP. It's been repurposed, though, to tackle counterfeit product or trademark infringement, where the product is sold outside of the US, and generally speaking it is China, and offered for sale into the US on those platforms contained at bullet point 2 there. So what it does, as you can see here, is it's quite a powerful tool. It gets you some pretty punchy injunctive relief against both the infringer and also the intermediaries. So there's interim relief, whereby the marketplace listings will be removed, and there are a number of obligations on the intermediaries to identify and disclose details, and then to also help in keeping those listings shut down. But then the idea behind that is that having got that interim injunction, there will then be a period of negotiation with the infringer and a settlement agreement reached, or failing getting any sort of settlement or negotiation, either a default judgment if there's been no reply, or a summary judgment in the event that the other side have been unreasonable and there's not really any case to answer. So the requirements there mean that this is sort of one item to have in a toolkit, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It's not a replacement for a general online brand enforcement program, but it is a very useful way of being able to take down a lot of stuff very quickly and effectively. So it's a damages-based agreement, essentially. So the law firm would take the risk, one or two of the law firms that we partner with in the USA on that. And then from there, any damages collected above that 20K threshold would be shared accordingly with various, with the brand owners. Basic timescales here, just to quickly show you these. So you can see that the injunctive relief is very quick. We're looking at about sort of a month from the date of identification and filing. And then the negotiation period, that can really vary, anything from sort of 5 to 9 months, depending on which platforms it is. and also who we're dealing with on the other side. Are they legally represented? A lot of them are. But we find this is a really good program for our clients because a lot of these infringers talk. And so if they know that, brand X takes action, they'll move on to the next one. This is the sort of final one that I want to touch on quickly. So Mercado Libre, this is a little bit different to the ACPA. So whereas the ACPA was a kind of all-encompassing disclosure, injunction, settlement, this is more of a sort of pre-action motion that we've been filing against certain parties. Basically, we would go to court pre-action, request disclosure based on infringement on Mercado Libre, and then be able to actually go to Mercado Libre and get pretty robust disclosure from them of all of the seller details, including sales to date as well. So having got all of that, what we would then do is identify sort of any big sellers or networks and then go after those parties in particular. So a different way of approaching things to the ACPA or the usual program, but still one way of tackling it without going to court straight away. So just to sort of sum all of that up then, so a bit of housekeeping at the outset and knowing really which platforms to target and what you'll get out of your investment in targeting them. Working with the platforms as well is key. I think using all of the resources that they have, be it, the advocacy pieces or the proactive anti-counterfeiting sweeps. And then I think, something that we also find is using a bit of commercial leverage as well. So that this goes back to the multi-stakeholder engagement and seeing actually if they're a trading partner or if the prospect of your brand trading on their platform would be enough to actually get them to comply so that you can start negotiations with clean hands, if you like. So that was everything that I wanted to go through today. Thank you.